Manchester United is a club that is very close to me. I love the club. I've been following them for about 2 decades. The first of which I saw them reaffirm their status as serial winners, the latter of which I saw them become serial underachievers. And despite now what's in totality been 10 years of turbulent times attributed to a tumultuous trident of transition, toxicity and trials and tribulations towering over these titans of top flight football, I do feel that now, more than ever, it is crystal clear what the problem is. And here's why. Okay, off the bat, a couple of things to consider. 1. My analysis of the club will begin with the appointment of Jose Mourinho. I'm counting the first 3 years post-Fergie as the transition period. And 2. I won't be focusing on the Glazers anywhere in this video, because let's face it, they've been discussed to death already. Besides, I kinda feel like I don't have to, because some of the points I raised today are inevitably going to be linked back to them one way or another. That's how intrinsic they are to the problems with/within this club. After all, these man run this shit. So yeah, with regards to the ownership, draw your own links when applicable. But as far as this video, I'm going to focus more on the micro issues at the club. And by the end of this video, you will be presented in the form of one phrase, 2 words, what the primary problem is at Manchester United. Hint, it's an alliteration, but in order to get there, we need to start by addressing the micros, and this will be separated into 2 categories: issues on the pitch and issues off the pitch. And no, I'm still not referring to the Glazers, believe it or not. So what am I referring to? Well, let's start with that, shall we? So by the time Mourinho arrived at United in 2016, I think it's fair to say that he was already kind of past his prime, because despite still being a relatively young manager at 53 due to his immeasurable success in the previous years combined with his insane ego, the special one just seemed stuck in his ways and wasn't willing to move on with the times. This meant that not only were his tactics outdated, but more importantly in this scenario, so were his methods of man management. Because you see the stern, no-nonsense approach he took towards the likes of Javier Zanetti, Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba and Cristiano Ronaldo wasn't going to work with this new generation of, let's be honest, snowflakes. And essentially what happened was Mourinho's tough approach was seen more as toxic, which eventually led the players to rebel against his authority, and as a result he was sacked 3 months into his 3rd season. Following which, the reins were handed over to club legend Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, a nice soft-spoken friendly bloke who was basically as far away from Mourinho as humanly possible. And due to the players having had to endure the perceived toxicity generated by Mourinho in the previous 2 years, Ole's methods and overall approach was seen as a breath of fresh air, and I think it's fair to say the players really took to him, and in turn it began with a bang, going unbeaten in his first 11 games. And this for me was a huge turning point. Because you see, because the friendly and laid-back approach of Ole initially brought better results than the tough and stern Mourinho, I think at some point the players managed to convince themselves that dropping your expectations, as long as the vibe was all good, was enough to bring success back to United. And don't get me wrong, this isn't something the players consciously decided to do. No professional footballer wakes up and goes, I'm gonna half-ass this training session/match today. Or at least I hope not. How the f would I know? But instead, when you're not being pushed to your limit constantly from day to day, especially at a club like United who are expected to be up there with the very best, it's only natural for your effort levels to drop over time. Which is why, as you saw, after the initial bounce, the rest of Ole's time at the wheel was mediocre at best. Hell, he went to lose 50% of the remaining games in his first season after that honeymoon period, and it didn't get much better from there. Now for me, what United needed in 2016 was either for the board to back Mourinho till the end, yeah right, or they needed a coach who operated somewhere between Ole and Mourinho. A coach who will hold high standards in training, but will also know how to communicate with a modern day player to get the best out of him. Someone like Jurgen Klopp for example, or Pep Guardiola, or in an ideal world, an English speaking Zinedine Zidane. But instead, the enormous shift from Mourinho to Ole, coupled with the initial handful of decent results they achieved under Ole, made it almost okay for the players to, albeit subconsciously, drop their standards without facing any real repercussions. Keep that in mind for later on. But yeah, as it happened, they were cruising along. Until that day in August 2021. So this is what I believe went down. Well, it's not that hard to see, to be fair. Basically, Ronaldo walked in, took a quick scan, assessed the situation, and basically thought, yeah, well, Mendes is fucking fired. But to be honest, this should have been, and to be fair, still could be the start of something good. You had a world-renowned sporting figure, one of the greatest players of all time, showing dissatisfaction with the standards in your institution. And whether you like to admit it or not, in the long term, there has been some good to come out of it already. But what happened in the short term? The usual. Much like this collection of corny crab cakes did to Chris's Colden Catty ex-club coach and compatriot, they rebelled against his wishes too, and the club became worse. A lot worse. And the consequent sacking of Solskjaer, followed by the subsequent appointment of an interim manager, encouraged these pricks to, let's be honest, phone the season in f***ing November. But you know what, with the Ronaldo effect, this isn't much of a surprise. As I said, Ronaldo's presence and high expectations was always going to be of benefit in the long term. But in order to get there, you had to first deal with the short-term backlash of these absolute cases throwing their toys out of the branded prams. And to be fair, the summer of 2022 was the first time you can see little signs of Grandpa Pissy's whining paying off, as United went out and brought in the best available. A coach with a good reputation for both his tactical and man management approach. And yeah, we know what happened with Ronaldo, and I won't go too much into that. Watch this for more info. But while he did leave the fans with a sour taste, the long-term benefits of his second stint were starting to show. Because along with the coach, United also signed a world-class CDM, someone they've needed for years, along with a few other key recruitments in the team, leading to the second half of that season to be a pretty positive one overall, as United were back in the top 4, reached the FA Cup final, and actually won the Carling Cup final, the first piece of silverware in 6 years. In short, the Reds were back on track to go marching on. Or so it seemed. Cause yet, as we speak, they seem to have gone off track once again. But why now? Why, after all those years, all those changes, all those sacrifices, all that money spent, are we still having the same old f***ing issues? And for those right about now saying, well, you should know that a rebuild takes time and there will always be bumps along the way. Yes, I do know that, but that's in terms of having a few terrible results. Not this shit! Look, I myself put up a post a few months back in support of the manager following his 7-0 drubbing at the hands of Liverpool. Cause yes, as disgraceful as that was, those kind of things are part and parcel of a rebuild. It happens. But this? A 23-year-old kid publicly speaking out against his boss? I'm sorry, but rebuild or not, that should not be happening. So how do we stop it from happening? Well, on the surface, it's actually pretty simple. And this is a trigger warning for the CR7 stands watching this, because I 100% without question, without a shadow of a doubt, would back the manager. Why? Again, it's simple. To eradicate the main problem, the reason why as to all this is happening, the reason why as to the standards and expectations having dropped, the reason why Mourinho was sacked despite initial cup success, why these lot were downing tools in November without little to no fear of consequences, why Oli was turned down by multiple players when asked to be his captain. Yeah, I don't fucking know either. Why literally one of the greatest players of all time, who also happens to be a bona fide club legend, wasn't able to inspire and motivate. Why even now, one of the great minds in world football is still struggling to get a fine tune out of them. And why Manchester United, a club where courageous comebacks are steeped deep into their history, usually look beaten when going behind, i.e. the fundamental fault in the culture of the club. Player power. Because simply put, these lot are exploiting the recruitment policies in modern day football, where managers at the bigger clubs aren't given the time that they once were and are giving in when they're not satisfied with certain aspects of a manager, because they know deep down their jobs are safe. The power is with them. And what you're essentially seeing is a bunch of overpaid, spoiled, teenage/20 something year olds trying to run the biggest footballing institution in the country. And you wonder why it's in the ground. And one more thing, by the way, you really think Ronaldo didn't know all this? Let's be fucking real. He saw what happened under Oli. He saw what happened under Rangnick. He saw how these men were operating even in certain spells under Ten Hag. And he knew this was going to keep happening. And well, he didn't have time to wait around. And while this revolving door approach around managers serves the likes of Chelsea just right, you're forgetting one thing. This is Manchester United we're talking about here. They've always thrived when they had stability in the form of management, team setup, footballing philosophy, and just a solid structure throughout, to the point where, let's not forget, their last long-term manager used to basically run the entire club. And while an identical scenario in the modern game is highly unlikely, if you wish to continue to strive towards anything remotely close to that, then you need to back the manager for as long as possible. And it's not necessarily because he's the greatest thing since fucking sliced managers, but more than anything, you need to show these Gen Z jackoffs who's the real boss. If you don't, then big man, you can buy as many players as you want and bring in as many goats as you please. Nothing will change. Now, speaking of GOAT, for those CR7 stans who as a matter of fact haven't switched off when I was backing him, we'll take this as some sort of reward since I'm about to criticize Erik Ten Hag now. Cause yes, we are now moving to the second and much smaller category of this video. The issues on the pitch. Stop picking Rashford! Okay, it's not that simple, because he actually isn't the problem or anything, but let's start with him. So in the beginning of this year, I made a video on Rashford where I stated that he hasn't really improved much as a player and had just merely gotten his confidence back and was potentially just a smidge of self-doubt away from another bad run of games. And the response to that video, to be fair, was non-existent. Because none of you f***s actually watched that. But you see, this is the thing. Near the end of that video, I mentioned that Rashford improving as a player overall, i.e. increasing his footballing IQ and adding more dimensions to his game outside headers, will take time to do. And luckily for him, he does have the ideal manager to improve under. The man is Guardiola trained after all. But now we have had time. 2 summers in fact. And well, there hasn't been much of a change. And I'm no coach, but I'm pretty sure that you can't build a possession-based passing team when one of the key players of said team doesn't, actually fucking pass. Now, some of you right about now may be thinking, well, if Rashford isn't the problem, then why are you singling him out? Well, you see, the problem with the performances of some of the other players can basically be traced back to player power. Not giving it all in games, not training properly, not listening to advice, perhaps milking an injury, or even random ass cases like Casemiro, who last year walked in with 5 Champions League titles, this year walked back in like he ate at least 4 of them. But here's the difference with Rashford. I don't believe for a second that Marcus falls under any of those categories. Like, I don't know about you, but the guy doesn't really strike me as lazy or a rebel, and certainly not a snowflake. My man turfed the f***ing government. I honestly believe that Erik Ten Hag has instructed him to continue playing like he is, and that is why this is baffling me. Cause I'm sorry, but I don't need to take tips from Pep on football and barbers to know that unless Marcus does improve up here, this just won't work. Look, the truth is that this club, as a result of stagnation in terms of team standards on the pitch due to cultural issues such as player power, combined with the issues off the pitch such as the lack of investment in the infrastructure, are still very much playing catch up. What they shouldn't do now is make any rash decisions that will encourage this toxic culture, halt their progress any further, and take them off track once again. Because with the likes of City, Arsenal and Liverpool going from strength to strength in recent years, along with the always dangerous Chelsea and now somewhat knocking on the door of competency Spurs, catching up will take time. But if we do work on reinstalling the foundations upon which this great club was so successful in years gone by, patience, stability, support and, yes, investment, then there's no doubt good times will return. After all, this is Manchester United we're talking about. And that is that. Agree or disagree? Beats indifference. Once again, don't forget to like and share. Let me know what you believe is happening inside the club that's leading them to still have the same old problems, cause let's face it, in this case, ignorance certainly ain't f***ing bliss. And as usual, do subscribe if you haven't already. Till next time people, keep rolling.